Hello, everyone out there in podcast world. Hope you're having a great day. You're listening to or watching the Service Business Mastery Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Tersh Blissett, and my co-host is under the weather today. So Joshua will not be with us today, unfortunately. Super sad about that. Not really, Josh. No, I'm kidding. I am. He was spending last week with his family, vacationing and doing some skiing, some snow skiing, and now he's just not feeling the greatest. I guess he says he's got a sore throat and he's got all like stitches in his throat feeling. He probably should stop talking, honestly. But no, I'm just kidding. Josh, I hope you feel better, bud. Today, we are going to talk about the basic foundations of SEO for home service businesses and why it's important to understand them. So Josh is really going to be missed because he could ask a lot better questions than I can when it comes to this, because obviously he does this every day. Sydnee Stevenson with Main Street Marketing is our guest today, and I'm excited to talk with her. She's been doing this for a long time. Actually, I didn't realize she'd been doing this for that long. We are mainstreet.com is the website to their business. But yeah, we're going to talk about citations, local pages, and optimized Google My Business or Google Business Profile pages. So if any of that stuff interests you, hang out and ask questions on the live chat if you're watching the live stream. But yeah, I am super excited. If you have any questions for myself, don't hesitate to reach out to us, servicebusinessmastery.com. There's a little icon at the bottom of the screen, and that's not a chat bot. It's actually somewhere where you record a voice message, and then that voice message comes to Joshua and I, and then we respond to it, hopefully in a timely manner. But for those of you who have never watched or listened to this episode or an episode of the Service Business Mastery Podcast, it is a podcast focused on service business owners, managers, and technicians who are considering becoming business owners themselves. And our target is to help answer some unasked questions or things you didn't really know to even ask, or maybe you've known them in the past, but you've forgotten about them. So thank you for hanging out with us. And I want to give one quick request, and that would be if you're on a podcast catcher and you're listening to this episode, please give us a review. Let us know how we're doing. And share it with a friend. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with today's show.
Are you looking for valuable business advice to reach that 7-figure revenue mark? Do you want actionable tips to properly navigate through every business challenge you encounter along the way? Let Tersh Blissett and Josh Crouch be your guide in getting you to the top here at Service Business Mastery. Tune in as they sit down with world-renowned authors in business, leadership, and personal growth who share valuable insights about management, marketing, pricing, human resources, and so much more. Let their nuggets of wisdom gold guide you in owning a thriving, profitable, and ever-growing business. Here are your hosts, Tersh and Josh.
Hey, Sydnee, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So you talk local SEO. I think that's what you do. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is correct.
Okay. Can you give us a background, a little bit about yourself, your history? Because you have family who are in the service business also, correct?
I do. So basically, my dad has been in the service industry pretty much my whole life. When I was born, he was working in management at Home Depot. And then around I believe it was when I was 3 years old, he had obviously a very young child at home. And he just realized that, yes, the money was good in big box retail management, but he wanted something with a little bit more flexibility that he had more control over so that he could, sort of organize his schedule on his own terms and be able to be there more for my mom and I. So he decided to take the leap into owning his own business. And that was a grout and tile cleaning and repair franchise called the Route Medic, if any of you have heard of it. Yeah, that was when I was very young. He still does it to this day. And around 7 or 8 years ago, he added an additional franchise to that called the Patch Boys, which specializes in drywall installation and repair.
Oh, that's really cool. That
Yes.
How has it been? You don't know, like my kids can't answer this question very well either. I don't know if you will, because you've probably since you remember your dad's been a business owner. That's how my kids are too. Like I've
Yeah.
owned businesses since before they were born, so they don't know how it is having a parent that is a business owner versus not. Does your mom own a business, or does she work at all, or is it?
Yeah, so at the time, yes, my mother does work, but she always had a job. She was always in the corporate world, so she was kind of on a different wavelength, and it was so interesting to me growing up how, the mentalities between the two. Like my parents are both very smart people, but the mentality is so different. Like my mom was always like she wanted certainty, she wanted consistency. My dad was always the kind of guy that he just wanted to go after it. And the fact that things changed every day, like it probably wasn't his favorite thing in the world, but he was just always more like any problem that comes along, I can solve it, and this is what I want to do. So
Do you feel like that's why you started a business? Like, do you think you would have if your dad wasn't an entrepreneur?
That's a great question. I honestly, would I have started a business if that weren't the case? Maybe, but I could tell you for sure it was a pretty vital inspiration for me at a very young age. And I think the reason for that was because I just, I watched my dad as he sort of built his businesses from scratch and, even just being like in the service world at a very young age, even in a very small capacity. When I was younger, if there was ever a time when my dad had to do like an estimate or a service call and, my mom wasn't available to take care of me, I would go on those appointments.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
I would be there when he would sort of interact with his customers and get to know them. And, kind of having like that experience of watching how he interacted with his customers, but also all of the things that happened on the back end, like dealing with his employees and doing all the invoicing and, just all of those things. I had an understanding at a very young age that it was a lot of work and that nothing was certain. But I think the one thing that inspired me all about it was, my dad just really seemed to love it. He was passionate about the work that he did. He was passionate about his customers. And he was also just very confident in his ability to think through things and problem solves and to really offer the best service to his customers and, be able to obviously provide for my family and I. So
That's cool. That is really cool. I get asked that question a lot too because my family is not a family of entrepreneurs. I have an uncle who they do amazing fences, but he wasn't doing that when I was growing up. But my grandfather had a landscape company that my
yeah.
entire life, like every summer, I went and worked for him, and I hated it 100% because I was on a golf course laying sod all summer long in the sun. It was terrible. I swore
Yeah.
I'd never do that my entire life. Um, but that's the only experience that I had with the entrepreneurial side of things. And you said that your dad might not have enjoyed the constant change every day, but I believe that was one of the things that I enjoyed the most when I was first starting out. Was I have terrible ADD, and the fact that it wasn't the exact same thing every day was amazing to me because it was a new challenge that I could attack and conquer every day. And still that way, I feel like it's that way in business still for me. But yeah, that's really cool. I'm glad to hear that about you and what you've learned from your dad. I will say that I take my kids on job sites too all the time, as long as it's like, permitted and it makes sense. But those are some of the things that you'll remember forever, like you said, that you remember, going back with your dad and on estimates and whatnot. And there's times where my kids are like, I'd rather stay home and play video games. But I'm like, well, just come on and ride with me for a minute.
I always thought it was so fun.
Yeah, it is. And you can see after they actually leave the house that they actually have a relatively good time hanging out with dad. But with that being said, let's jump right into the nuts and bolts here of like local SEO and the foundations for SEO for the home service businesses, because SEO is such a, I mean, it's obviously, it's a buzzword. It's what companies are built on, is SEO and local SEO building. But there's a lot of people who don't understand what that is. You know, even if they get like a sim rush or a report or something, or ref or whatever, reports, they don't really know what to do, how to improve it or anything like that. And then there's, like you said, like we talked to earlier, I mean, the foundations and things that you need to make sure that you're doing a really good job at. Sometimes it's so easy to overlook some of these things because you're just focused on maybe just building blog posts and stuff like that. But I guess let's get started with citations. What even is that?
So a citation is essentially a reference to your, we call it in the SEO world, NAP information. It stands for name, address, phone number. So a citation is a reference to your NAP info somewhere on the web. So some of the most popular citations are Yelp. They could be Bing. It could be Yellow Pages. There's so many of them out there. But basically, the importance of citations is you can kind of think of them like votes in a popularity contest for a site in a roundabout way. So, think about like if you were to look at a business that has 200 mentions of it elsewhere on the web, you would probably trust it a little bit more than a business that's brand new that has maybe like 10. So citations kind of help you build that, popularity, that trust within search engines. So yeah, it's really just those mentions of your name, your address, and your phone number across the web. And the last thing that I want to mention about citations, at least initially, is that the consistency of that NAP information is also super duper important. So, we have clients come to us all the time that maybe they've had citations in the past built, and maybe they have changed their business address, or they've changed their phone number, and that hasn't always been updated throughout all of their citations. So it's not just the quantity of citations, it's also the consistency of them that really counts from an SEO perspective.
That's a great point. And Dustin Cole in the live stream chat bar, he said definitely not a fan of Yelp. I don't know a whole lot of people
Most
who
people
are
aren't.
a fan of Yelp, unless you're in California. I know you're probably not a fan of it, but it's a necessary evil out there.
Yeah.
I was just talking, the last recording actually, that I was talking with Zach about some friends of ours who they were basically held hostage by Yelp. And so yeah, we've had those conversations with Yelp. But with that being said, what about the call tracking numbers? Because like you get a call tracking phone number, and I understand the purpose of it. It makes perfect sense. Like, instead of asking someone necessarily like, where did you call us from, the call tracking number would automatically populate in CallRail, that, this phone number, blah, blah, blah. So this came from Facebook, or this came from Google, or this came from Yelp. But obviously if we do that, then that's going to mess up our citations, correct?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's kind of one of the, I guess, inherent downsides of it. But it all depends on how you structure it. So let's say like you're doing your SEO in-house. I mean, really, as long as you're able to at least attribute like what platform those leads came from, then there might not really be a need for a call tracking number.
Okay.
And that just sort of helps right off the bat with, not having those, like, we have this number here and that number over there. I would say when call tracking numbers typically come into play is when you're working with a third party, like an agency who needs to be able to say and attribute certainly that like this call came from us. In which case, the simplest way to do it, I would say, would probably be, if that one company manages everything, or, perhaps you could work out something where you wouldn't need to use it. I would say, like, for our clients, we will always put a call tracking number, at least on their site, on their Google business profile. And it'll be the same for all the platforms that we manage. So, I mean, I would say it's kind of a necessary evil in the sense that on the one hand, like you need it for attribution. On the other hand, yes, it can contribute to NAP inconsistencies, but there are kind of ways to maneuver that just based on how you structure it.
You would think that, I mean, Google wants to be attributed to these things. So you would think that they would say that the phone number, if it's a call tracking number, it's not that important. Like it's not going to hurt you because we understand the marketing aspect of it, the tracking and stuff. But Ron Davis, a buddy of mine, he's in the live stream too. Shout out to Ron too. We just hung out in Mexico for a week and had a great time together. But what if you have multiple locations? I'll put up on the screen here. What if you have multiple locations and different local numbers? That information would be different, and that's kind of what I was going, like what I was asking as well. But if you have multiple locations, then each location should have a consistent phone number, correct?
It should. So in that case, if you have multiple locations, it's actually kind of a little bit easier because with that separate location, you can also have a separate address. So, like I said, the NAP info is name, address, phone number. So right off the bat, you already have a different address. And with the tracking number, you also now have a different phone number. So it really, in some instances, can be as simple as just tacking on that location modifier to the end of your business name. So you could say like, blank carpet cleaning and then Twin Cities, Minnesota, and just sort of have that location modifier in the name. So then you can structure it as if, like in Google's mind, these are totally separate businesses because they have the different name, they have the different address, and they have the different phone number. Obviously, for your purposes, it's all the same business, and for your customers' purposes, it's all the same business. But it does sort of create that differentiation in Google's eyes that, they're separate, and it's not just the same business with, a gazillion different addresses and phone numbers, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. I have seen in the past, or I've seen different posts and stuff, and Josh has talked about it a little bit, but I haven't asked him too much in detail, or maybe he told me and I forgot. But the adding the location modifier onto the business name, I'm pretty sure this is what we were talking about. I'm pretty sure my ADD is kicking in on my brain. But I want to make sure I'm clear on this.
Yeah, go for it.
That location modifier at the end, you don't get penalized for that, correct? On Google?
I mean, technically, I will say, if we were to really go by the book, it's not the best practice. Typically, Google likes it to
needs to be your legal name.
Yes.
Like that. Yeah. Okay.
But just for, practically speaking, like just in my experience, all I can say is I've seen clients do it in the past and it's worked for them. Yeah. Would I say that would be, my preferred way of going about it? Yeah. Probably not. I would say, ideally, if you really want to go by the book, just have that one location and have that one phone number. And really, if you do your local SEO the right way, you can still get visibility in other locations outside of that one city just with that one address. I think that's something that a lot of people, and I've even seen clients in the past that they think like, oh, well, if I want to rank in this city, 5 miles away, I need to have a separate address. And it's like, no, you don't necessarily. It can really come down to the location pages on your site, the radius that you put into your Google business profile. I mean, so many other things. So you don't necessarily need to have a totally separate address or location for every single city that you want to rank in. Obviously, if we're talking like 50 miles apart, then maybe. Right. But I would say in most situations, you don't really need it. It's just, for clients that we've had that, serve a really wide geographical area or something like that, then it is just an alternative method that you can use, just have it be, blank your business name, have that location modifier, and then you can always just have a separate business location. As long as Google can verify that this is a legitimate business address, then typically we haven't seen many problems with it.
Okay. So what happens if you ran a report on like an Ahref or whatever, and your NAP report that you get, I get one like once a month or whatever automatically, and you notice that like half of them are wrong on there. Like in your experience, what's what does a business owner need to do there?
Yeah, so I would say the beauty of it is that, so two things. NAP can be kind of very messy to correct if it's messed up, but there are enough tools and platforms out there that focus specifically on citations that you do have a pretty streamlined way of getting those cleaned up. So you can use a service like Yext, you can use Bright Local, and there are options within a lot of those platforms where you can go in and say, you can run the report. It'll show you the citations that have inconsistent information, and you can put in the information that you wanted to have and say, I need you to push this new information out to these existing citations that are incorrect. So I would say that's probably the main way that we go about it.
Yeah, just using something like Yext. Is there a platform out there? I mean, because Yext and them, they cost money. Do they all charge?
In my experience, unfortunately, yes. Some less than others. I would say Yext is probably one of the pricier ones, simply because not only of the upfront price tag, but also because you don't own those listings. So there are other platforms like Bright Local and I believe Whitespark as well, that once they're built, you don't have to keep renewing every month in order for those citations to stay live. It's just you own them. So
That's what sucks about Yext is like you're like, oh, you don't want to pay anymore? Okay, Yelp. They're
yeah,
not going to pay, so now all of our stuff's all screwed up. Yeah, no, I get
yeah.
it. On like Bright Local, I mean, and it's not advertising for Bright Local, but on Bright Local, or let me say this. There are times where I've used these different ones. I think
Whitespark?
Whitespark, yeah. I think it might have been Whitespark. Heck, I don't remember. It's been a couple years ago now, but it didn't have all the locations or all of the programs that were incorrect. Whenever we rebranded, that was a nightmare because our company was Icebound, and then we changed to Service Emperor, and so we had to find everywhere on the internet that said Icebound and change it to Service Emperor, and that was terrible. And I still see things every now and then that say Icebound on it, and that was since 2020. These platforms don't necessarily have all of the locations that when you like run a NAP report. Do you have to manually go in otherwise?
So you're saying if you undergo like a rebrand and it doesn't have the option to change that?
No. So like you run your NAP report and it says that, SEOlocal.com, but then whenever you go to Yext or Bright Local or whatever, Bright Local, localseo.com isn't one of the listings on there. So you have to manually go to that site and fix it, because I know that this was a terrible idea, but back in the day, I know for a fact, because I heard of people advertising this, they would outsource companies to do these citations on terrible websites. And then we didn't talk about this, but the fact that if it's an unrelated or a terrible website and it's got your information on it, that's worse than having it
not a good look for your business. Yeah.
Right. And so like you want to try and get your information off of there. Well, you can't, because now you can't access that stuff. Like, have you run into anything like that?
Yeah. So I would say you want to be careful about where you are building your citations. You're exactly right. And it comes down to really two things. One, is the site at all relevant to your industry? So obviously in the home service space, some that come to mind just off the top of my head, most of you are probably familiar with Angie, Home Advisor, House, platforms like that. Does it have any kind of relevance to your industry? And also, what is the authority of that site? Because if it's obviously a site that's already trusted higher by Google, then that sort of point reflects more positively on your business to be listed there than a spammier site. I would say with a lot of these tools nowadays, you can run a citation. I don't know what the exact term is. It's kind of different between platforms, but it'll basically you put in like your URL and it'll pull up a list of citations that your competitors have that you don't, and you can always sort of like cross compare.
Oh,
And it'll give you a list of recommendations of where your competitors are showing up that might be useful for you that you're not. And you can always just go through that and sort of manually check, like, using those criteria that I just mentioned. Is it relevant? Does it have high authority? I would not recommend ever blindly handing someone money to build you citations, because that could mean a lot of different things.
yeah.
And to your point, no, you don't just want to have someone build citations for you because it's cheap, and then now you're on these spammy sites that have nothing to do with your business, because that's really just going to hurt you in the end.
Yeah. Several years back, I remember seeing it all the time, like on Fiverr and Upwork and other stuff.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I kind of noticed it, then all of a sudden Google released an update, and they're like, now all of that stuff is, obviously it was black hatted at the time, and now it's all known by Google, and now you're getting, hit by it. And so it was like, oh, that was terrible. You can't get around doing the work and putting in the effort of, every time you do it. Like, you might get away with it for a little while, but then Google is going to catch up with you eventually.
Yeah, absolutely.
So moving on to local pages, what is that? And how many do we need?
So that's a great question. So a location page on a site is essentially just, obviously if you are a service business, you likely serve a service area. So a location page is just a page on your site that speaks to the fact that we are, this business, and we offer this service in this location. And basically what that does is it creates local relevance in Google's eyes. So let's say, like, my dad, for example, just to give an easy one, he does grout and tile repair services in the Chicago suburbs. Well, there are a lot of Chicago suburbs. So, just to have one page on the site that says, we're the grout medic and we serve the Chicago suburbs is not really going to cut it. So basically the location page is the page that says, we're the grout medic, we offer grout and tile cleaning in Elgin, Illinois, and we offer grout and tile cleaning in Hoffman Estates, Illinois, or so on and so forth. Because basically, when your clients are searching, and you've probably seen this, like when you go, at least I've seen this a lot recently, when I search for something, Google will prompt you to say, can we use your exact location to offer you more relevant local results?
Yeah.
And when it does that, it's pinging your location. So let's say, you have someone that's searching from, let's say Schaumburg. Google's going to register that. And now, okay, well, this business has a page on their site that speaks specifically to that location. This is probably a relevant result for that query. And then you're more likely to show up. So that's really the idea behind it.
Now, with those pages, they can't be the same page, right?
They cannot. And I would highly advise not just duplicating the same page over and over again, because there are tools that you can use to do that, where it'll basically just, you can add it as like an extension in WordPress, where it'll say, just duplicate this page 50 times and create service pages for, X amount of locations. Google does not like duplicate content. So I would say, if you're going to do this, do as many as you can do with the content being unique. So it really comes down to, like, I guess, your resources and how much time you either have to do it, or obviously how much budget you have to pay someone else to do it. But I would not recommend going the route of just using duplicate low quality content across a bunch of location pages.
So then you need to prioritize, like, which cities and towns and suburbs it is that you want to target, instead of just mass throwing it up against the wall. I'm sorry, did I miss you say, is there a certain percentage that is okay to be the same? Or,
I mean, I wouldn't say, I honestly have never thought about it in terms of percentages. All I can say, like, for me, the litmus test is, like, I mean, I will say, like, the bar for duplicate content is not super high. It's not like you have to reinvent the wheel with every single page. Yeah. It's more so the case that, like, if you were using the same wording, the same headings, or at least largely the same wording across every single page, like, to the point where it'd be noticeable to a human that, like, this phrase, like, this sentence is pretty much the exact same with maybe one or two words changed. I would say, as long as it's a little bit more differentiated than that, then you're probably good. As far as the percentage goes, I can't really speak to it, but I would say just sort of use your best judgment. If it sounds the same, it probably is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the problem that like when I built a site in like 2014, I think. And one of the things that I read and listened to Josh man, what's Josh's last name?
Ouch.
Plumber SEO. Yeah, no. The Plumber SEO he had a website, I mean, a YouTube channel, and he was the only person that I, at that point in time, it was 2013, 2014, that I was learning any kind of SEO from somebody about home services. And he had mentioned like you need a local page for everywhere you service. And I'm thinking, wow, because like, sure, it's Savannah, but then there's like Pooler and Thunderbolt and, all these small towns that are around each one of these other areas. And so I'm like coming up like, okay, duplicate page. Now let's remove content, but then like no more than 20% needs to be the same. And I was like, this is terrible. Like I can't come up with this much information that's different about the other pages. I mean, it took a lot of time for me to actually write it all out and not sound repetitive. It paid off in the end, but whew, that was so much work for me manually doing it. So I would definitely recommend, unless you are like killing it in all of these towns or want to target these towns, like just pick a handful of them. You don't have to do every single town in the area that you're working in.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And there are kind of two methods that that we personally have used to sort of prioritize. Number one would be just highest population and work your way down. So if you have certain cities in your service area that are more heavily populated, it might be more worth your time to build a location page for an area that has a population of 40,000 than maybe like 12. Alternatively, another method that some clients like to use is going after their more profitable zip codes. So, areas where they tend to get the most lucrative jobs, you could also prioritize it like that. Or maybe even, and I've heard this also from clients, sometimes they want us to go in terms of, what areas are easiest for them to get to. So obviously a job that's within a 5 or 10 mile radius of
Right.
your address it's going to cost you less money to travel there than
Mm-hmm.
someplace that's a bit further out. So there are lots of different ways that you can do it, but you're exactly right. I would say, like, unless you have either a lot of time to do it or a lot of budget to pay someone else to do it, you are going to want to sort of prioritize. And it also, the other thing I mentioned here is it doesn't have to be an overnight thing. Like, even like with us as an agency, when we build out location pages for clients, it's not all in one swoop. We'll typically, put the locations or the towns that they serve into kind of a matrix and prioritize them. And then we'll typically do, depending on the client's retainer, between 3 and 5 per month, and just sort of like work our way down. So that's just another thing to consider is you can always just build them out over time. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to build Rome in one day.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. So moving on lastly to the optimized Google business profile, which used to be Google My Business.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain what you mean by optimizing that?
Yes. So I would say the biggest thing as far as optimization goes, the biggest thing that I see is businesses just either not having a Google business profile at all, or the information on it is very thin. So what I would say is the more that you can answer your ideal customers' questions about where is this business located, what services does it offer, where does it offer those services, so on and so forth, on that page, the better off you are. And I've seen way too many times where we have clients come on board and they either, like I said, don't have one, or it's literally just their business name and maybe like a phone number. They don't even have their website linked in it.
Oh,
So I would say the more information you can provide, the better off you are. So I would say, foundationally speaking, you should always have your core services on that listing. And there are two ways that you can do this. I would say, obviously, there's the services feature directly within Google Business Profile, where you're obviously going to want to list that, and even add a description too to all of them, because it's either a 500 or 1,000 character limit description that you can add to each of those services. So utilize that. And you can also, I've also seen businesses, and we've tested this in the past, adding those services as product tiles. There's also a feature within GBP where you can add products, and that's also an easy way because it kind of sticks out a little bit more on the page. The services, not so much. That's not really as visible to the end user unless you're on a desktop. But those product tiles are a very easy way to sort of to call out those services that you offer. And you can also include, if you want to, a description, some pricing information, preliminary, if you want to. I mean, you can also link those back to your site. So I would say your services, and also it comes down to your location targeting. So if you have a physical address, you're obviously just going to add that. If you don't, you can also add a service area. And the way that we like to do that is we pick out, sort of in the same fashion as I was talking about earlier, where we'll sort of pick out, because you have a limit of 20 that you can add if you're doing a service area. So you can't just list everything. So sometimes you will have to narrow it down to, what are my most profitable zip codes? What are the largest? And, Google will sort of use that and put that into a radius that will then show on the page. So make sure that you're utilizing that as well. And then the last thing I'll say just right off the bat is, of course, link your website and then be collecting reviews. And there are multiple ways that you can do this. I've seen clients hand out little QR codes as they're leaving their clients' homes that just make it super easy. They can scan it. It'll take them directly to the listing where they can leave a review. Or you can also send out an email maybe after you sent the final invoice, after you're done with the work. But the more that you can prompt your customers to leave reviews, because reviews are very important, not only ranking signal, but also just customer trust signal. I mean, think about it. If you're looking at a bunch of businesses and you see one that has 38 5-star reviews, you're probably going to be more likely to go with them than some other guy that has, maybe 2. And it's very intuitive from a consumer perspective, but I feel like a lot of business owners really underestimate that. So I would say the more that you can prioritize asking your customers for reviews, do it, because it's very important.
Yeah. And as a technician in the field, it's very hard it's funny you mentioned that, because the last episode the last interview that I just did this morning, was with Zach with, Liftify. I wanted to add another F in there. Liftify, which is a reputation management software, getting reviews for your business. And, we were talking this morning about the fact that as a technician, that's the last thing that you think about as a technician or as a business owner. Like you mentioned, that there's not as much emphasis put on it for them. For us, we don't emphasize it as much as we should. And having a reputation management software, a program, that helps out a lot. But like you mentioned, having that QR code on a business card and handing that out at the end. And it's one of those things where reviews are great. They can be a challenge if you don't get it right then. Like if you wait till the next day to ask for it, because we do happy calls where we'll follow up with customers 2 days after the call, the service call, just to make sure that they're so satisfied and everything. But at that point, it's too late. Like they're not going to remember. They're not going to feel like doing it. Like you haven't. If you fixed their air conditioning 2 days ago, on that day they're ecstatic about you being there and fixing their air conditioning when it's 100 degrees outside. The 2 days later, once it's already cooled down in the house, they're less likely to be over the moon about you still, unless you have some amazing customer service that they're just memorable and they'll never forget, which at that point they're more likely to have already left your review anyways. But what's up, Jason? Jason is on the live stream as well with us. So you made a ton of really awesome points there. I was writing down notes as quick as I could. Thankfully this is recorded, so I don't have to worry about that. That Ron made a good point too, and they get the bill, talking about the homeowner. But Ron had a question about, is there anything else before I ask Ron's question though, because it's not about the Google Business Profile portion. Was there anything else you want to add to that?
I would say, I guess, just last things regarding the Google Business Profile. This is another thing that business owners forget about all the time, but it's super duper helpful, is when you're on job sites, take photos, take befores, take afters, and take more than you think that you need. Because again, and this isn't something that I would say is going to directly impact your rankings, but it will impact your conversions. When customers go to your Google Business Profile and they can see, okay, this is their work, this is what it looks like, this is what it looked like before they came, and this is what it looked like after. Those are just, all the little things. I tell clients this all the time. It's not always about how well you rank and how many keywords you rank for. It's also about how well can you build trust with someone that you've never met before. How do you convince someone that before you have the chance to go to their home and do an estimate? How do you convince them that you are the business that they want to work with? And unfortunately, just saying we're the best in town is not really going to cut it, because a lot of people can say that.
Everybody says that on their website.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, it's really like those reviews, before and after photos, just the little things that can sort of speak to the quality of the work that you do, the quality of your team. As much as you can, invest in those things, because it'll pay off.
That's really cool. Now, this is super techie, or I guess super techie. It's more technical than just your basic Google business question. Do you know if they track the metadata attached to the images that you upload into not GMB, but
GBP?
Google Business Profile? Huh?
Yeah, honestly, like the GBP GMB transition, like even the people who work in this industry are still struggling with it. So I get you. So that is something that was a pretty big myth in the SEO world, at least when I started, was that like I can tell you, when I first started off in this industry, my boss told me every image that you upload to that GBP has to have what's it called? Geotagging. It has to have the alt text in it.
I downloaded programs where I was just like going through and doing it to every single image that I was like, this is
adding like the longitude and the latitude. Yeah, I've been there, done that. Google has made it pretty clear over the past several years that when you upload images to the platform, all that gets stripped out of it. So, I mean, if you really want to go for it because it makes you feel better, or maybe like you want to use those images elsewhere, so it might be beneficial to have, that geo data and the alt text in it, then absolutely go for it. I would say, as far as GBP is concerned, I would not waste your time with it.
Okay, that's good to know, because I've done that. I've uploaded it, and man, what was that? It was Local something or another was the program that I was using for that. But I mean, in my mind, I can still justify it because I put some of those images on our website as well. And so
exactly. So that's what I was saying. Like, if you plan to use them elsewhere, then it obviously doesn't hurt. But if you're only planning to use them on GBP, then probably not.
So Jason Jillian made a good point here. Our customer reviews let them know that we're the best in town, not by me saying it. Our customers are our biggest source of referral and future work. I love it when our customers say that we're the only one to come up with a viable solution. Good job, Jason. You put a whole bunch in there, knowing that I am dyslexic. So I nailed that one. Didn't stump me.
Yeah, and that reminds me, I forget where I saw this, but I think it was an Instagram post from a service provider where the girl was saying, I don't get to decide that I'm the expert, you do. And that really stuck out to me, because it's like, you hear so much, like, people say, we have the best customer service and the best this and that. But at the end of the day, like, if your customers don't think that, it doesn't really matter. So it's really, I mean, I think Jason nailed it. Like, have your customers speak to the quality of your services and speak to the fact that you're the best in town, because other customers are going to trust that a lot more than what you say.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love getting video referral reviews. Like,
those are the best.
Those are the best. And it's very, I love it whenever they're actually organic. I mean, that's the way they need to be, as organic. But there are times where I've had like people say, like, look, I'll say whatever you want to say. Like, what do you want me to say? Like, Well, I want you to add the town you live in. I want you to put what we did, like a heating repair, reheating replacement,
Yeah.
or whatever, and like guiding them, because those are little things that are helpful, even in the written reviews as well. Like they
Yeah.
write out the location that they're in, and the repairs that they did, and all that good stuff. But yeah, we have a couple of them that are video reviews, and they make me feel good, even if they don't actually do anything.
Yeah.
But,
Those are
uh,
video reviews are gold on a website. Like if you can have a solid like 2 to 3 video reviews, or even one, honestly. I had a client when I first started in digital marketing, had literally one video review on his homepage, got so much business out of it. And people like he would have customers that would come to him and say, like, I chose to reach out to you because of. So I mean, yeah, video reviews gold.
that's
And
cool.
if you have it, display it very prominently on your website.
Okay, so like just below the fold, or would you say
I
higher
mean,
on the website?
honestly, yeah, I would say, like, wherever people are most likely to actually see it,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
because they work.
That's cool. So I will ask you Ron's question. It came in a little bit late, but it was on the last area, the section that we were talking about, the local pages. So Ron said, so should we always be looking to add location pages? And if so, does it get to the point where it's too many? So you did mention at the end of us talking about that we don't have to do them all at one time. You can add them along the way. But the second part of his question is a good point. Is there a period do you get to a point where there's too many?
Yeah, I'm sure there is. Personally, in my experience, I've yet to reach it.
Yeah.
I would say where it gets to be too many is I would say where it's most okay, how do I structure this answer? I would say probably the biggest factor here is how big is your service area, because let's say you're serving a gigantic city like Los Angeles or
Hmm.
Miami, like that's a huge area. And so in those cases, yes, you're probably going to end up, if you do it right, with a larger quantity of service pages just because you're serving a bigger area.
Yeah.
If you are not in a gigantic market, I personally don't see a reason why you would need any more than, I mean, just to throw out a number, 30, maybe 40. I mean, there's so many factors here.
Which
And
30
also,
or 40 is still a lot, especially if
it
if
is.
they're gonna be different. They're not gonna be the exact same page.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say, like, even that's probably a pretty high number for most service providers. Like, I can tell you when my dad was doing, the Got Medic back in Maryland, we lived in a pretty small suburb outside of Baltimore. So there were maybe like 15, 20 surrounding suburbs that were really like worthwhile for him to have had. I mean, obviously he didn't because he didn't know about all this stuff back then. He
All
was
right.
still doing
Yeah.
like Valpak and all that stuff.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but it really just depends. I would say 30 to 40 is probably a pretty high number for most businesses, but you just kind of
Okay.
have to use your judgment. Like if you feel like if you're to the point where you're in like really niche zip codes that have a total population of like 600, three
Right.
thousand, it's probably
Yeah.
like, do you really need that? Probably not.
Yeah.
But it all
And
depends.
they're used to it anyways. They're used to having to search for the next city over whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Sydney, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for that to happen?
The best way for that to happen would be going to our website, wearemainstreet.com. That is WEAREMAIN street.com. We would be happy to, if you own a service business, we can audit your citations, we can audit your site, give you some pointers totally for free, just so that you kind of know like where your site stands and what things could potentially be improved on it to get better results. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn, Sydnee Stevenson. I love connecting with people there and just staying in touch.
Cool. Sydney, it was great chatting with you. I really appreciate you hanging out with us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. If anybody has any questions for me or Josh, feel free to visit servicebusinessmastery.com and click the little green dot at the bottom right of the screen and record a message. And that message comes to Josh and I, and we will get back with you as soon as possible. But with that being said, I hope you had a wonderful and safe week until we talk again next time on the Service Business Mastery Podcast. We'll see you later.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Service Business Mastery. Now that you are equipped with essential business advice from this impactful conversation, you are one step closer to becoming the successful owner of your dreams. If this episode has been helpful to your business journey, don't forget to subscribe to the show, leave a rating, and share it with other owners as well. Visit servicebusinessmastery.com to learn more.